Well, folks, we made it. This is the second to last episode of this limited series, The Philosophy of Darkness, where I try to pull a few just basic, uh, you know, allegorical observations to be found in the various old classic 1990s World of Darkness games. And finally, at last, we're going to talk about Mummy the Resurrection. Now, much like with the video I did on Kindred of the East, you could put a little asterisk on this one because Mummy the Resurrection was not really a full game series. The original Mummy book and the second edition Mummy book were both just generic World of Darkness supplements, mostly tied to Vampire the Masquerade, especially the very original version of Mummy. But, designs that, they're kind of compatible with any of the other White Wolf game lines in terms for the rule system. However, the mummies, there's, only like between 40 or 50 of them on the whole planet. They weren't really a big enough faction to justify getting their entire game series all to themselves. Now, in the aftermath of the Tempest that destroyed the Underworld and destroyed Sigia and the Shadow World and all that kind of stuff, at the end of the Wraith setting, all the old mummies were among those beings who were torn to shreds in the Duat, the Egyptian word for the Shadow Zone. They were no longer able to, reinvest their old original corpses. The old spell of life created by Osiris was undone. However, Osiris himself, Lord of the Underworld, had managed to keep a hold of himself and survive the Tempest and create a new spell of life, and that is the basis for player characters in Mummy the Resurrection. These are no longer, original mummies from ancient Egypt. What they are modern-day people who have either just died or on the cusp of death, a tragic, too soon kind of death, not something that was supposed to be their natural fate, but, some sort of bad circumstance or unexpected event, brings a sudden, inexplicable demise. Also, that there is something lacking in the individual is also a key factor. Some flaw in their personality that's kept them from truly achieving their best idealized version of themselves. Now, remnants of the original souls of the original mummies, as well as some other ancient Egyptian souls who had been serving Osiris in the afterlife in the Dark Kingdom of Sand, have been sent out to find these individuals who are at this point, at the cusp between life and death, and merge with them, bargain with them, find within them some balance between the two spirits so that they may become a new third entity made up of both. Unlike demons who are forcibly just taking over the shell of a person and, knocking their soul out and just using their body as a vessel to carry themselves around. The mummies are not overriding everything. In some way, the ancient spirit is still a little secondary to the modern spirit of the person because the modern spirit hasn't been fractured by the tempest that swept through the underworld. This means that the mummy essence is sort of taking a back seat, and whatever this composite being is, it's still going to primarily have their modern identity, their modern memories, and so on and so forth. After initially, making the agreement that they're going to do this and become one, they'll re-inhabit their body and bring it back to life with just enough energy to get their ass on an airplane and over to the Middle East, where they can find one of the various mystic sites of the Web of Faith, where hopefully members of the cult of Osiris or the cult of Isis will be there waiting to finish the ritual and turn them into a proper mummy. Arguably, the mummies in this particular version, but also the earlier versions, might be one of the only unambiguous good guys to be found out of all the various kinds of factions of supernatural creatures and humans that you can find in the World of Darkness setting. They're devoted to Osiris, they're single-mindedly against Set and corruption and Apophis, and all of this, of course, is for people who are familiar with the material, realizes that, Apophis is actually just the worm from Werewolf the Apocalypse, and Set is likely to be Cain from Vampire the Masquerade, which means Osiris might actually be able And since the mummies are the creations of Cain's slain, or shall I say, Set's slain brother, in a way, in a very direct way, not even kind of like a metaphorical way, but like mummies are the anti-vampires of the setting. But in terms of like what kind of, philosophical thing you could pull out of this whole design for how mummies operate, there's a few things. Obviously, like we ourselves, don't die and meet with ancient Egyptian souls and get forced back into our bodies or anything like that. But human beings can experience something known as ego death, whereas you find these moments where all of your assumptions and your entire worldview and everything, you kind of like felt things were building to comes crashing down around you, and you're kind of forced through like an extreme shakeup of your internal thought processes and your opinions. This can happen to people more than once. Some people can skate through their whole life without ever experiencing it. What I feel that the game kind of illustrates is that of the various options that a person has upon finding ego death, compared to the different other kind of creatures that have their souls replaced or combined in different ways, such as changelings or demons. But with mummies, it's the turning back to ancient wisdom, finding the balance between modern sensibilities and the traditions of the old ways. Obviously there's religious overtones to that, not even straight out in the book itself. I mean, after all, the mummy, upon first returning from the dead, has to make a pilgrimage to the so-called lands of faith to be able to find one of these ancient sites that have been tied together in this like a network of holy sites that Osiris has kind of pieced together from across the shroud. Regardless of what ever religion one might choose in the real world, a person who's undergone that kind of level of ego death might find solace and comfort and a purpose again by turning to some sort of older traditional way of looking at things, as long as they don't let it override their modern sensibilities. They still have to be themselves and at the forefront of the driver's seat. But the thing is, and what's kind of often overlooked in the constant quest for progression and forward movement in our society, is that we all are basically navigating through a gray, formless void. And without landmarks, you really don't know what direction. You could be moving, but you have no idea if you're moving forward, backwards, or sideways. You can only tell what direction you're going if you're able to orient yourself to where you've been, i.e., you have to be able to remember and attach yourself to a past, whether or not it's a good past or a bad past. You have to have a past to anchor yourself to, so that you can tell that you're moving away from that past and not just looping and spiraling yourself right back to where you started or anything along those lines. And so in that regards, attaching yourself to, the ancient wisdom of whatever kind of culture or society you find yourself in, certainly does have some benefits. But as I said, the whole point of Mummy the Resurrection is that it's a third soul. It's a combination of new and old. It's finding the balance so that you don't become too quagmired in stasis. Clinging too hard to the past means you're not moving at all. And that also means that you're not really navigating that dangerous gray haze we all find ourselves in. And so I guess that's about it for Mummy the Resurrection, in terms of, just little tidbits I can think that might actually somehow relate to our own real daily lives and human psychology and all that kind of stuff. So that means there's only one more episode left, and it's going to be about Demon the Fallen. Which already, for those of you familiar with that material, it's, kind of a sequel to Milton's Paradise Lost in some ways. So certainly there's already been a ton said on that subject, so I guess we'll just have to wait and see what I do with it. And until then, stay waspinated.